Hello again, everybody, and welcome into our video series here on BaltimoreBaseball.com. I'm Steve Cockey, and the first half of the season is behind us. The second half about to begin Friday night at Camden Yards as the Orioles and Cubs square off. Here to tell us all about it, break it down as only he can. Now we bring in our senior writer, Dan Connolly. Dan, how are you?
Good, Steve. How are you?
Doing pretty well, Dan. Now we got to start off here recapping the first half a little bit. So the Orioles come into the second half of the season after the All-Star break, 4 games under 500 at 42-46. They are 4 games out of the second wild card spot with 5 teams ahead of them in that race. Dan, just give us your assessment on this first half of the season for the Orioles, how things have gone, and maybe where you expect them to shake out in the next couple of months.
Well, first of all, overall, Steve, it's been a disappointment. I mean, when you start out 22-10 and you have the best record in baseball on May 9th, and then basically fall apart and go 20-36 from that point on, you can't call this a successful first half. I mean, it's disappointing. They should be better than 42-46. There's been injuries. That's obvious. I mean, they lost Zach Britton for a long period of time. They lost Chris Davis, Chris Tillman, J.J. Hardy. Some key members of that team. Wellington Castillo was on the disabled list twice. Ryan Flaherty, who I know is not a starter, but he's a guy who helps them with depth. He's been out for a while. So, I mean, I think that when you look at this team, you think it should be better. The question is, will it be better? And that's kind of where the Orioles are right now. Will they make this team better? By adding guys, should they punt and restart? Or should they basically stand pat and hope that the guys that, they felt like we're going to get them to the playoffs, the Kevin Gausmans, the Dylan Bundys, the Manny Machados, would be able, to step it up a little bit and really help this team get back to the playoffs.
One of the biggest disappointments, other than I would say Kevin Gausman, Dan, has got to be Manny Machado in the first half here of 2017. He's at the All-Star break with just a .296 on-base percentage, a .445 slugging that is down nearly 100 points from where it was last year. What do you think is kind of the cause of this? If you had to pin it on a couple of things, is it the pending contract on his mind? Do you think having that All-Star game in Miami and trying to press to get there was on his mind? Or there's certainly maybe a luck factor here as well, where the exit velocity has looked good and maybe hits just aren't falling in. How do you assess the first half for Manny Machado and these numbers that are significantly down, Dan, from what we would have expected?
Well, you know what? I mean, first of all, he has 18 home runs. He's batted .333 in July, in 9 games in July. So there is, you can look at those kind of things. You can look at some of those advanced metrics like you talked about as far as the BABIP and the exit velocity, and he's hitting the ball hard. He's hitting it at people. I'm not a psychologist. I don't even pretend to be a psychologist. I don't know if he's putting too much pressure on himself for some of the, the things that you talked about, the All-Star game, being the main guy, the contract, all that stuff. I know he hasn't been the offensive player that we're used to. I mean, this guy's a 280, 290 hitter. We've grown accustomed to that. 230 with a on-base percentage under 300 is not what we're accustomed to. So, do I think that he'll have a better second half? Absolutely. Do I know what's wrong with him in the first half? I don't know. But he has shown, more than a glimpse. I mean, in the last 9 games, he's played well offensively. Like I said, batting .333. So, I think if you look at it and you think, well, he's on the upswing. I don't think that Manny Machado is going to be a .230 hitter by the end of the season. Now, I don't think he's going to have an on-base percentage under 300 by the end of the season. So I'm not really all that worried, but I understand when people look at it and say, boy, his numbers really are down, because they are. But he's still on pace for 30-some home runs, and I think his numbers will be there for the most part by the end of the season, I would imagine.
Orioles fans can certainly hope for that, Dan. Now, got to get a little bit into the trade market because trade season is upon us. The first big deal coming on Thursday with a crosstown Chicago swap. The Cubs and White Sox swapping Jose Quintana for prospects, with, of course, the starting pitcher going to the Cubs, who are about to come in here on Friday to Camden Yards. I'm going to pose this one to you in 2 parts, Dan. First part being, what would you do if you were the Orioles in this situation, buy or sell? And then part 2, what do you expect Dan Duquette, Buck Showalter, Peter Angelos and company to actually do heading toward this trade deadline?
Well, I think what I expect them to do is to kind of get a sense in the next couple of weeks where they are. That's what I would do anyway. I mean, they're only 4 games out of the wild card. They are getting guys, back healthy. We expect Chris Davis to be activated from the disabled list on Friday. The Orioles have Zach Britton back already. I think they want to see what happens with a team that's a little bit healthier and see what they can do in this next 10-game homestand and beyond before they really make that decision. Do I see them selling off major parts to get, big-time prospects? I don't, because that's not been the MO. The Orioles did it one time in 2000 when they sold off the Mike Tillmans and the, BJ Surhoffs and Mike Bordicks, and they got almost nothing in return. They got Melvin Moore and about 14 or 15 guys who we can't even name anymore. So I don't expect the Orioles to do a fire sale. And truly, if they want to build their farm system and they want to do it through trades and prospects, the only guys that I think are really going to bring in those type of guys to build your farm system are Britton, Machado, Brad Brock, and Jonathan Scope. You're not going to be getting, a major prospects for Seth Smith or for even Mark Trumbo or Chris Tillman. You're not going to get those kind of prospects. So I don't see the Orioles going ahead and selling guys who are still within contract this year and next year and completely hitting the restart button. Not with several guys still around for 2018. I just don't see it happening.
I don't see it happening either, Dan, but it should be an interesting next couple of weeks nonetheless. Now, you alluded to this a little bit, but we'll get into this for the final question. This next 10-game homestand, Cubs, Rangers, and Astros. Of course, the Astros are off the charts with 60 wins at the All-Star break, believe it or not. Unbelievable. The Cubs and Rangers, 2 talented teams that have probably both underachieved. How big do you think this next 10 games is, Dan, for kind of setting the course for the Orioles? And do you think if they, say go 8-2, that maybe they go more into buying mode? If they're 2-8, maybe they do look at selling a little bit more than maybe we would have expected.
Yeah, I think that the next couple of weeks, whether it was at home, road, who they were against, I think it's pretty important because you really want to get a sense of what your team is at the end of July, or as close to the July 31st deadline as possible. And right now, these Orioles are an enigma. Like we said, they started off so strong. From that point on, from May 9th on, they've struggled. And so you got to figure out who this team is. And I think the next 10 days or so, it's going to give us a little bit more of a glimpse, or at least kind of further decide who this team is. The Cubs are a good team, and I obviously they have not done what they needed to do, what everyone expected them to do. But there's a reason they won the World Series last year. They're a really good team. The Rangers have a lot of really good players, and then the Astros might be the best team in Major League Baseball. So it's a tough test as well, but the Orioles have played well at home. And so I think that if they go 8-2, I absolutely positively expect them to try and build their pitching staff a little bit, trade somebody, a solid prospect for another guy that they hope, they can catch lightning in a bottle. I don't see them doing much more than that, simply because I don't think that they have the prospects to get a Quintana type guy. They don't have Jimenez, the guy that the Cubs had as their 1 or 2 prospect that they traded, as well as 3 other guys. The Orioles don't have that right now, and they're not going to be trading some of these guys. They're going to be holding on to a Chance Sisco. They're going to be holding on to an Austin Hayes. So I don't expect them to make a big splash. But if they go 8-2, yeah, Steve, I expect them to try and make this team a little bit better to get that wild card or even the American League East Division. I mean, they're not even that far out. 7.5 games seems like a lot, but they play Boston a lot. So they're not even that far out of the AL East race at this point. So I just don't see them, shutting it down unless they do really, really poorly in this particular homestand.
It should be an interesting next couple of weeks, Dan, and next couple of months to see how this 2017 season transpires, how the Orioles build or don't build off of that 42-46 start. For Dan Connolly, I'm Steve Cockey. Until next time, so long.